If you've ever accidentally shown your weapon while concealed carrying, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Guys, like and comment. The comment section is out of control. There's nothing I can do to stop you, so get in there and find out what is the most important part of this channel. This particular video is sponsored by Simply Safe. More on them later. If you're looking to support the channel, the biggest supporter of the channel is Big Daddy Limited. Is it worth it? 99 cents for the first month? Absolutely. You're worth it. So get in there and check it out. Of course, a big thank you to other sponsors, such as LAS Concealment for all of your holster needs, and of course, USCCA for conceal carry insurance. Ladies, gentlemen, I often forgotten, but most certainly not by me, every model of AC-130, welcome to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about a very cool topic, and that's one that I do every day, but I don't really think about, and that's conceal carry. Now, a lot of channels specialize in conceal carry, but I realize I haven't done an updated conceal carry video in quite a while, so I thought I'd tell you guys some things that I do to conceal carry day to day, guns that I carry, products that I use, and techniques that I use, and that type of stuff. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, when it comes to conceal carry, there are three main topics that I'm going to touch upon. That is going to be belt, holster, and gun finally. So to start it off with, let's get into the belt a little bit. The belt is something that is often overlooked. A lot of people tend to use dress belts or whatever, leather belt they have lying around. And to me, the belt can really make or break your concealed carry experience. So you should have a belt that is designed specifically for concealed carry. Now, the question might be, what are you looking for? Very easy answer. So with a concealed carry belt, much like a war belt or something like that, you want something that is going to be stiffer than your typical belt that you'd usually wear. So slightly less comfortable, but there's a reason for it. You have to be able to support that weight of a holster with a gun on it. Otherwise, you're going to have kind of an uncomfortable experience. Now, there are a lot of good belts out there. So we'll talk about a couple belts that I've used and that others have used, because again, I've talked to a lot of people about this to ensure that I wasn't too biased in the products that I'm showing. Now, in the case of this one right here, we have the Core reinforced leather belt. That's Core with a K. What's cool about them is, again, I'm not paid by these guys or anything. In fact, they sent this belt forever ago and I've used it and I've never done a review on it. So here you go, mini review. Reinforced leather belt, can hold up the weight of the gun, and then has a little track system so you can incrementally adjust it. I like it quite a bit. We of course have the belt that I helped design from Cigar Gear. That one's awesome as well. Blue Alpha Gear has a really good belt, and that's one that a lot of my friends use. We also have Flagrant Beard. They make an awesome belt as well. And a final shout out to an Amazon one, which is the Hanks leather belt. I actually used that one for quite a long time as well, just a thick ass leather belt. Those rock as well. So the point is it doesn't have to be anything expensive. I mean, these Core reinforced belts are like 39 or 40 bucks, something like that. The Hanks belts are like 40 bucks. So it's not expensive or too terribly expensive, but they work very well. And a belt will absolutely change the way that you conceal carry. So make sure that you have a good conceal carry belt. And we're going to talk about why in just a second here. Next thing we're going to talk about is holsters. So there are a multitude of holsters out there. Now, for most people, there's, of course, different ways to conceal carry, whether you have inside the waistband or outside the waistband and what position you're carrying at and all that kind of stuff. I typically carry inside the waistband, and I carry appendix for the most part. Now, I understand a lot of people don't like appendix. And what I mean by appendix is it's right at my front, just right around my buckle right there. So some people don't like it. It's what works best for me, and I'll explain to you why. So the reason I use appendix is I used to carry 3 or 4 o'clock, but I can't tell you how many times my shirt would ride up and I wouldn't even notice, and then my gun showing, that type of thing. Is it that big of a deal? No, you're concealed carrying, but I want to keep the gun hidden. It's the whole point in concealed carry. So with appendix, I feel like I have a lot more essay on what is happening with my holster to make sure that nothing's riding up and over the gun. I can make sure that I have control over it, and especially if you get into a hand-to-hand fight. If I'm having to keep somebody from grabbing onto my gun, reaching my hand behind me in a hand-to-hand fight is going to get my ass kicked. Versus having it in front of me, it's much easier to protect myself by hunching over and still being able to fight versus having it behind. So those are two of the reasons. Also, I find appendix draw to be incredibly fast, and a lot of people appendix draw incredibly quickly, sub-second. So those are the particular reasons that I carry appendix. I'm sure everyone will get in there and argue. Again, this isn't a video about what's best. It's just about what I do. And for me, appendix carry works absolutely awesome. And again, another consideration for how you carry is going to be, what are you doing? You know, are you mostly driving? Are you commuting all the time? Are you mostly walking? Are you doing whatever? For me, appendix works very well for drawing from a seated position, both in a car or at a desk or something like that. I understand that you typically want to take that seatbelt, especially the horizontal band, and pull it up and over your holster to ensure that you can get to your gun if you need to. But again, think about all that type of stuff. A lot of people can, conceal carry in a way that's great for the range. You know, they can go to the range and they can draw very fast in a certain position or what have you, but then it doesn't really work for their day-to-day life. So ensure that you carry in a way that is feasible for you and that works for you.
Send.
Now, when it comes to holsters, there are a lot of great holster manufacturers out there currently. So a couple great ones. I've been carrying the T-Rex Arms holsters for 3+ years at this point. Again, Lucas is a good friend of mine, so understand that, is there, collusion with T-Rex Arms? Probably, maybe. I don't get any kickbacks for selling these, but I love their holsters. I love the LAS concealment holsters. Obviously, they are a sponsor of the channel, so understand that. There are a multitude of other great holsters out there. We have A&R, which makes some really awesome holsters as well. Standard Co. Tons of great holster manufacturers out there. Honestly, when it comes to holsters, it's kind of the same case of what you see with red dots nowadays, where a lot of modern companies make really good options. Like, 20 years ago, you didn't have that many options, but when it comes to nowadays, there's a lot more. Now, as far as material, people often kind of get a little pissy about everyone using Kydex nowadays. The reason we're all using Kydex is because most people are carrying Glocks of some type, and you don't want to use a leather holster because those can deform over time. The piece of that leather can bend in, and then you depress that trigger as you holster, and that's going to be a bad day for you. So I almost exclusively recommend Kydex. A lot of people think it's going to be uncomfortable. Well, with a combination of a good belt and a good holster from a good manufacturer, some of the ones that I've mentioned or many others that are out there, you're gonna have a very comfortable carrying experience. Now, mind you, it's not gonna be like not having a holster. A lot of people try to find a design that, it feels like they're not wearing a holster at all, and usually it's harder to get to in that case. So you're always gonna feel a holster, but it can definitely be comfortable with the right belt and the right holster combination. Now, when it comes to holsters, I want one that is going to be stable, and the reason is consistency, and that's why we have the belt as well. I want to ensure that I have a belt that is stiff enough and that is cinched down enough and that it is going to stay in place to ensure that my holster is going to stay in place and that my holster is not going to shift. That way I always know where my gun is. That allows me to have consistency of draw, which is very important in a high stress situation. I can't tell you how many times I've carried older holsters back in the day, the old leather ones with the clips, and it would shift throughout the day, so you'd be constantly fixing it and that type of thing. And I don't do that anymore with the more modern holsters, like I've mentioned right here, because they're engineered very well, and then with a good belt, it keeps everything in place. Now, as far as the design goes as well, there are several different types of designs. You have the more minimalistic type that don't have an extra magazine, then you have the type that have an extra magazine. What I found over time from carrying is that I actually prefer the extra width that I get from having an extra magazine on there. So not only do I have an extra magazine should I need it, but it also adds stability because of the width of the clips and then the kind of wing stabilizers on here. It's a very stable platform. And then also they are made in such a way that they contour around your waist. So because of that, it's very comfortable against my body. It's very consistent. And those are all things that are very important to me when it comes to conceal carrying. And again, for my individuals out there who have a little bit more survival weight, an appendix might be a little bit of a problem. Now, for those people, choose a holster that is going to work for your body type. Again, everybody's different. Find something that works for you. But if you can conceal carry, you should conceal carry, as far as I'm concerned. Now, as you know, this video is sponsored by Simply Safe. So why I like Simply Safe so much is that compared to many other companies out there, with Simply Safe, you can add piecemeal what you need and when you need it. So here's what I mean. With a traditional company, you have to buy everything all at once and then you have it and you can add to it, but not very easily. With Simply Safe, I can add what I need as I need it. So for example, if I end up, buying more than one gun or something, I keep the majority of those firearms in one room. I can add additional layers of security to that room. So I can have door open sensors, I can have window break sensors, I can have things that can sense water, all that kind of stuff to let me know what's going on. I can have security cameras up, which gives me peace of mind, and that all links into my phone so I can see what's happening in real time. So I very much so like SimpliSafe. It's a fairly low price to get started. Can't say enough good things about SimpliSafe. It's everything that you want in a security system for our 2A advocates out there. Get out there, check out SimpliSafe. Can't recommend them enough. So we have talked about holsters, we've talked about belts, but we've left the most hotly debated subject for last, and that is guns. So within guns, we'll be talking about ammunition, some different selection types, and all that type of stuff. So the question is, that I hear quite a bit, is what do I carry daily? So I have two main guns that I typically carry. I carry a Gen 3 Glock, not because I think Gen 3 is any better, it's just because I've had this gun for fucking ever. And then I also carry the Langdon Tactical Beretta M9. So I have two different ones that I use. That's pretty much the limit of what I typically carry. I will conceal carry other weapons as necessary for reviews and that type of thing. But for the most part, if I have my choice, it's either the Glock or the Beretta, just because I trust them. They feel very natural in my hand. I'm very fast with them. I'm very accurate with them. And I'm very, like I've said before, consistent with them. And that's what's most important. So when it comes to gun selection, I'm not saying that you have to have a Glock or a Beretta, and those are the only two weapons out there. In general, there are three main principles that come down to a gun to make sure that you have a gun that is appropriate for concealed carry. So you have accuracy. A gun should be accurate and it should be consistently accurate. Good. Most modern handguns fit that category. You should have a gun that is reliable and consistently reliable in the conditions and situations that you find yourself in. So if a gun works great on the indoor range, however, in the cold environment that you work in, if you're concealed carrying up in Alaska or something like that, the gun has problems as it gets cold, well, then it's probably not the gun for you. So again, find a gun that is accurate, that is reliable, and then of course, that is the correct size. So we have reliability, accuracy, and of course, size. So a lot of people make a big deal about size. I tend to carry full-size guns because, again, it comes down to consistency for me. I want to make sure I'm comfortable with the gun, that I can make a good, consistent shots with the gun. A lot of people carry a subcompact gun that they never practice with, and they go to draw it and actually shoot it in the range, and they're like, holy God, I can't hit anything with this. With a full-size gun, like this particular Glock 17 or my Berettas, I know that I'm very accurate, that I'm very consistent out to about 150 yards. I can make good, consistent hits very predictably. It's for that reason that I carry these weapons, because I'm very, very confident in them. And that is going to be the key factor. Make sure that you're confident in your weapon. That comes with training. You should train and shoot these guns a shit ton. And on top of that, you should also maintain these weapons appropriately. So make sure that you're doing that. Now, when it comes to that, another thing to think about is going to be ammunition. Ammunition is a hot topic. I have seen pages and hours spent talking ballistics gelatin and penetration depth and this shooting and that shooting. And I'm going to be absolutely honest with you. I will definitely acknowledge that good duty ammo rocks, Spear, Hornady, all that kind of stuff. Those are awesome rounds. But the fact of the matter is, for me, I don't really shoot enough of it to be confident with it. Because depending on the gun that you're carrying, you're probably going to zero your gun to that particular round. Now, for me, I do carry with the dot, and I absolutely recommend having a dot, and you should practice with it, and it makes you a just more proficient shooter, in my opinion, once you become good with them. But the point of it is, if I'm going to be shooting with a duty ammunition, I need to have my dot zeroed to that duty ammunition. If I spend all of my time shooting a different type of ammunition, thousands upon thousands of rounds, either you're shooting a slightly non-zeroed optic and you're becoming used to that particular ammo, and then you move to your high-powered duty ammunition. The first time you fire it, you know what the fuck's happening. So for me, it comes down to consistency. What I shoot is what I carry, which is 124 grain NATO spec ammo. I'm going to be honest. I'm sure everyone's going to get super pissed about that. But the fact of the matter is, I know precisely what my gun is going to do. I know precisely where my rounds are going to land. And everything is very predictable and very consistent with the ammunition and the weapons that I choose, which is why I choose them, which is what is most important to me. So if you want to, you can argue about ammunition type, but I think what matters much more than ammunition type is that you train and that you're confident in where those rounds are going to land and where they're going to impact. That is much more important in my opinion. So when it comes to optics, a lot of people ask me, what are my typical optics that I recommend for concealed carrying? Well, there's a lot of great optics out there right now. Typically, I am using a Trijicon RMR, an Aimpoint Acro, or a Trijicon SRO or something like that. Those are kind of my main ones that I stick to simply because they are time-tested, proven to be reliable optics in a variety of conditions. I do understand that they're more expensive than some of the other optics out there, but it's what I stick with because I know that they're going to work in those situations that I might possibly need them. Now, when it comes to my RMRs, they do have a pretty long battery life. We're looking at like a couple years. I do swap out the batteries on my RMRs about every year or so. Now, when you swap out the batteries on an RMR, you do need to re-zero your optic. It usually isn't off by much, but it's important that you do that to ensure that you know precisely where your rounds are impacting. And again, that shouldn't be that much of an issue. A lot of people make a big deal of that, but you should be practicing pretty consistently with your weapon, so that shouldn't be so much of an issue. But in any case, that is my typical battery rotation cycle on my weapon optic. Every single one of my concealed carry weapons does have a weapon light. I almost exclusively run Surefire X300s of some type. And the reason for that is that I'm not going to take a shot unless I can positively ID something. A weapon light ensures that in certain lighting conditions that I can ID things. Because of that, I'm typically going to have enough light because of the weapon light on there, and I'm not worried about night sights. On top of that, I find night sights kind of weird because you can't really ID a target, so what the fuck are you aiming at in the first place? Everyone's going to argue about that. Have fun arguing about that. In any case, that also comes back to the optic. Because the question is, what dot brightness do I run it at? Well, I run it at a dot brightness that is good enough for the day conditions or the brightest lighting conditions. For most people, those brightest lighting conditions are going to be at night with the weapon light on. So once you have the weapon light on, you're going to be able to see your dot fine. It's not going to be as bright as it would seem in the pitch black. So again, I don't mess at all with my dot brightness once I holster this weapon. I just keep it where it is, which is typically about one click up from full power. Some may argue that having your dot that bright makes it hard to make the long shots. I would argue it's very simple to roll the gun over, tap down in brightness once if I need to make an extremely long shot, should that ever be a situation that I'd find myself in. And again, you can play what ifs all day, but the biggest thing is, are you training with this gun and are you confident with the gun? Another question is, what do I change internally on a weapon for a carry gun? Pretty much nothing. I want to ensure that this weapon is as reliable as is possible. And typically changing things on Glocks or any other weapon can lead to unreliability. I have a stock barrel, stock trigger, stock everything on this Glock that I'm running. Of course, it does have slider work done to it. Slider work was done by Landers Weapon Systems, as was the mounting pocket for the RMR, which of course is necessary to be able to mount an RMR. Now, on all my carry guns, I do have stippling on the frame for my polymer type handguns. Now, that being said, if you have that stippling too rough, it can catch your shirt when you're concealed carrying, and it can kind of hang on to it and kind of cause more of a printing issue. And again, this is something that you'll have to work through. I typically recommend a slightly less aggressive texture on a carry gun compared to like a competition gun, for example, to ensure that you're not having those problems. And that also brings us up to another point, which is, again, another issue with training. You should be practicing drawing your weapon from pretty much every item of clothing in your wardrobe. The reason for that is different shirts are going to lift up differently than others. So it's important that you train on that. Do you have a jacket? How are you clearing the jacket? Do you have a different type of t-shirt that's a little tighter? You're wearing like super tight t-shirts. You want to show off the muscles. It might be a little bit harder to draw that gun and get that lifted up. So make sure that you're practicing. One thing that I typically do is when I'm going to go out for the day, typically I'll take my weapon, clear it, make sure it's empty, and with whatever I'm wearing on, I'll practice drawing that weapon up several times just in the mirror, watching my presentation, seeing how my shirt lifts, just to make sure everything is working out fine at that point. Then I'll load up my gun, holster, and be good to go for the day. A couple other small notes on things that I do. Batteries, I change out the batteries on my Surefire X300s about every 2 months because I do use my Surefire weapon lights quite a bit. And because of that, they only have so much runtime. So you should be changing them out, and you should be practicing on activating that switch through whatever means you think is most necessary based on techniques that you know and you have learned and that you have practiced. When it comes to the ammunition in the magazines, I do try to cycle that about every 2 months or about every time I change the weapon light. Now for me, I've been doing it a lot more often. Pretty much every time I go to the range, I'm firing the ammo out of that magazine that I'm using for concealed carry, and then I'll load up a different magazine and have that one. Most magazines are going to be fine under compression, but you don't want to keep the magazine that you're betting your life on under compression for like a year. You could possibly run into issues. Make sure you cycle those magazines out. Be kind to your magazines. Also realize that magazines are finite things. They will eventually fail. Springs need to be replaced. Parts on magazines need to be replaced. Ensure that your concealed carry magazines are in good working condition. Again, if I had to reiterate anything with this particular video, it would be consistency is key. Consistency in your holster placement, consistency in how you draw, consistency in how you lift your shit up, consistency in how your weapon performs, and then of course, consistency from you. You should know precisely what your gun is doing. You should know precisely what your ammunition is doing, and you should be training yourself to a high level. It is absolutely your right to conceal carry. If you choose to do so, you have to understand that you must hold yourself to a higher standard. Make sure you hold yourself to a higher standard if you are concealed carrying. Be that expert with the weapon, because the Gucciest holster, the Gucciest gun doesn't matter if you haven't trained at all. You could pull out a $8,000 Glock, but if you haven't trained a single day, you're probably still gonna die when you need it because you haven't trained at all. Make sure that you are training, not just in shooting, in hand-to-hand and other things to ensure that you are ready should anything ever occur. Ladies and gentlemen, concealed carry is something that is near and dear to my heart. Something that I do quite a bit, something I don't talk about quite as much, but make sure that you train. There are tons of great training companies out there that are specific to concealed carry courses. Definitely go check them out. And of course, we have our usual suspects. We have Haley Strategic, Cogworks, Bear Solutions, tons of great guys. But more important is, if you don't have the money for that, get online, watch good, reputable instructors, and copy what they're doing. Watch yourself, film yourself, and get better. Not everything costs money. And the cool thing about training is that for the most part, you can do it on your own, and that is absolutely free. All it costs you is your time, and it is absolutely worth it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this video gave you a good launch point to either start reconfiguring some of your stuff, to kind of gut check yourself, or in the case that everything's looking good for you, you're able to be like, all right, yeah, this is a good refresher, move on with my life, continue to get better. Make sure you look cool, guys. I've got nothing else for you. All right, final thing for you guys. Again, I'm gonna harp on kindness. Make sure that you're kind to one another. Everyone has something that they're going through. Times are rough, right? Make sure you give people the benefit of the doubt. Be nice to each other. Do a good deed. Say something nice. Again, your attitude affects those around you. So continue to be a good, positive influence. We need more of those. We need more people to step up and be those good role models. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. You know, if we have gotten this far, that we're gonna rep Survival Dispatch. Survival Dispatch is like a repository of survival information that you can subscribe to. Highly recommended. Survival information is something that is in dire need of being revived and learned more. So get in there, check it out. Final shout out to my Patreon people. Thank you so much. You guys are the wind beneath my wings. Love you guys. I've got nothing else for you.